Forget New Year, New You. This season is about slowing down, locking the doors, and cozying up at home with the one you really want to do nothing with. Your dog. After the holiday chaos, those quiet nights with a blanket, a podcast, and your pup feel like the reset you actually need. Ollie helps make those moments easier with fresh protein-packed meals made from real human-grade ingredients, so your dog can enjoy some quality comfort food too. Choose from 5 recipes and get a personalized plan for your dog's needs. Meals arrive perfectly proportioned with a scoop and storage container, so serving is fast and mess-free. And with Ollie's in-app on-demand health screenings, supporting your dog is easy, ensuring more cuddles for many years to come. Visit ollie.com/truecrime and use code TRUECRIME for 60% off your first box.
This episode is brought to you by 74 Seconds. 74 Seconds is a new podcast that tells the story of a traffic stop that ended with the world watching a man die, live on their phones. It's the story of Philando Castile and the officer who is about to go on trial for his death, Geronimo Yanez. NPR News examines this intersection of race, policing, justice, and safety in America. Subscribe to 74 Seconds now on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. This episode is also brought to you by Lifeway Kefir. Lifeway Kefir is a tart and tangy cultured milk smoothie that you've probably seen in the dairy aisle of your local grocery store. They're high in protein, calcium, and vitamin D. And in addition to that, each cup of kefir contains 12 live and active probiotic cultures and 15 to 20 billion beneficial colony-forming units. And you don't just have to drink the smoothies by themselves. If you check out the blog at lifewaykefir.com, there are tons of delicious recipes you can make with kefir, like carrot cake smoothies, breezy lemon blueberry parfait, and strained kefir cookie dough dip. And if you'd like a coupon, just go to lifewaykefir.com/courtjunkie. That's Lifeway, KEFIR.com/courtjunkie. Hi, everyone. This is Jillian, and you are listening to episode 25 of the Court Junkie podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Today's episode is about something incredibly dangerous that goes on in many organizations and institutions in America and around the world, in high schools, college campuses, and beyond. I'm talking about hazing, the imposition of strenuous, often humiliating tasks as part of an initiation into a program. But before we get started, thank you, as always, for listening, subscribing, sharing with your friends, leaving reviews, and donating to this podcast. I'm excited to announce that we recently hit our 2 million downloads mark, and I could not have reached that milestone if it wasn't for all of you. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you. As a reminder, to discuss the cases that you hear on these episodes, along with other true crime and court-related news, join our Court Junkie discussion group on Facebook by going to courtjunkie.com/Facebook. You can also tweet me at courtjunkiepod, find me on Instagram at courtjunkie, or email me at podcast@courtjunkie.com. I also post all of these episodes along with some photos from these cases on my website at courtjunkie.com. And I'll even let you in on a little secret. You can also see what the next episode release is going to be about right there on the homepage. That's courtjunkie.com. And now, let's get started with today's episode. It was November 19th, 2011, and Florida A&M University's marching band, the Marching 100, had just performed during the Florida Classic in Orange County. The Florida Classic is the name of the rivalry football game at the Citrus Bowl between Florida A&M University and Bethune-Cookman University. The Marching 100 is a pretty well-known marching band. They've performed at the Grammy Awards, along with the inaugurations of American Presidents Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. But behind the scenes, there was a disturbing secret, a hazing that went on behind closed doors in order for members of the band to receive respect. On this night in November 2011, about 20 band members changed their clothes after the performance and then met in their parked bus, known as Bus C, which was sitting in the parking lot of the Rosen Plaza Hotel in Orlando, Florida, where they were staying. There was excitement on the bus because 3 of the band members were going to be partaking in a ritual known as Crossing Bus C. 24-year-old Dante Martin was president of Bus C, and as such, he got to decide who was allowed to cross and when. And on this night, he had decided that 3 members would take their turns. 26-year-old Robert Champion, a drum major, watched as his friend and roommate on the trip, Keon Hollis, was covered with a blanket and subjected to a series of hard slaps as he sat in one of the front bus seats. Keon then stood up and held his hands up above his head, while fellow band members slapped him hard across the torso. Keon then slowly made his way towards the back of the bus, while his fellow band members struck him, slapping, kicking, even punching, trying to prevent him from his goal of reaching the back door of the bus. When he finally made it to the back, he collapsed, trying to catch his breath. He managed to get off the bus, and he vomited in the parking lot. And then it was Robert's turn. Dante told him to stand up and take his shirt off. He endured brutal hits as he started his crossing. A female band member held him back so the other members could hit him with drumsticks and straps, punch, and kick him. At one point, Robert collapsed into a seat, and another member braced himself on the seat backs and jumped up and down on him. When Robert finally made it to the back of the bus, he said he was having trouble breathing and that he couldn't see, even though his eyes were open. He was given Gatorade, but it didn't seem to help. Robert collapsed, completely unresponsive, as the other members called out his name and tried to get him to respond. One member started CPR, while another called 911.
Orange 25 Rescue.
We are at Rosen Plaza and on I Drive,
Okay,
and
what's the
one of
address?
our drum majors is on the bus and not breathing.
What's the address?
I don't know the address. I really don't know. We're against at Florida A&M University.
Okay, can you ask somebody there for the address? Because that's what I need.
Hey, I can't. I'm on the bus. I am on the bus.
Hang on 1 second. I've got 9700 I Drive.
Okay, is he breathing or is he not breathing?
We don't know if he's breathing or not, but we need to get an ambulance ASAP.
I have help on the way already. Okay, is he awake?
He's not even. He was finding a little. He wasn't responding. We thought he was breathing because he was making noises.
Okay.
But I don't even know if he's breathing now.
Okay, is he awake? Do you
His
know?
eyes are open. His eyes open. He's not responding.
Okay, but is he breathing?
I have no idea. I cannot tell you that.
Okay. Well,
He just threw up.
he just threw up?
Yes.
Okay, well, like I said, I do already have help on the way. You're in the back of the hotel on a bus, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you're right by him now?
He's in my hands, man. He's cold. He's in my hands.
Okay, well, I want you to lay him flat on his back and remove anything from under his head, okay?
Okay, I'm going to try. He's heavy.
Okay, I understand. Just try to do your best, okay?
All right.
The dispatcher tried to walk the caller through clearing out the vomit from Robert's mouth, but the phone cut off when help arrived. Robert was transported to the hospital, but it was too late. He died while in the ambulance from his injuries. The cause of death was determined to be hemorrhagic shock, which is what happens when you lose more than 20% of your body's blood or fluid supply, making it impossible for the heart to pump a sufficient amount of blood to your body. He didn't have any broken bones, but there were deep bruises on his right shoulder, on both of his arms, and on his back and chest. The autopsy detailed multiple blunt trauma blows to his body. The manner of death was determined to be homicide. The investigation into Robert's death brought to light a serious hazing issue at Florida A&M University, and particularly within the Marching 100 band. Police officers interviewed Robert's fellow band members, who told them that Robert had never approved of the hazing rituals, which included 3 parts of the crossing over. The first part was called the hot seat, in which the participant sits in one of the front bus seats and is hit repeatedly by other members of the band. The second part is called the prepping. During the prepping, the participant stands up and puts their hands on the luggage rail and is then slapped hard a number of times. After the prepping, the participant then goes on to the crossing, where they try to get to the back of the bus while being attacked by the other members. The band members also told investigators that the hot seat could be ordered at any time. If someone did something wrong, they would get a tap on the shoulder by an older member, who would then order them to a seat towards the back of the bus. A blanket would be thrown over them, and they would be pummeled with fists, drumsticks, and straps. They told investigators that the bus driver or band director would often be distracted up in the front of the bus and wouldn't know that this was taking place. They all told police that these hazings were a rite of passage. Police also found that the president of Bus C, Dante Martin, had been the one who would determine who would be hazed. According to the band members, Dante would decide who gets into the hot seat, who crosses over, and for how long. 21-year-old Rakesta Hardin told police that she had gone through a hazing earlier in the day as Bus C was headed to the Florida Classic. She said Dante tapped her on the shoulder and told her that she didn't have a choice, that she had to get into the hot seat. She said the beating hurt so bad that she was unable to perform at the game later that day. When asked why she participated, she told the officers that she had no choice, that Dante told her that they weren't going to let her off the bus unless she did it. She said that after the game, she was supposed to finish and cross over on Bus C2, but that she decided to take a different bus home. She said she was still badly hurting from earlier in the day. And later, she learned that Robert had died on Bus C that night. Dante Martin, along with 14 others, were charged with felony hazing and manslaughter in Robert's death. Dante went to trial in October 2014. At the time of the trial, 9 others who had been charged with Robert's death had escaped jail time and were instead sentenced to probation and community service. Another case had been dismissed, and another, Jesse Baskin, who admitted to taking part in the beating, was sentenced to 51 weeks in prison. 3 others would stand trial months later. Dante was also charged with misdemeanor hazing in the case of 2 other band members, and he was facing up to 15 years in prison if convicted at trial. In his opening statements, State Attorney Jeff Ashton, who you might remember from the Casey Anthony case, called the hazing a dark tradition, but said that the fact that this is a tradition is not a defense. He said that Robert died because his friends beat him to death. He said Dante wasn't just a fellow band member, that he was the one in charge and the person who organized the ritual that led to Robert's death. Dante's attorney, Dino Michaels, said in his opening statement that Florida's hazing law is murky and that the ritual was more like a competition in which people tried to prove their toughness. He pointed out that no one was forced to cross the bus, but that participants did it for respect and recognition. He said this was a tradition that had gone on for a long time, prior to 2011, and that Dante didn't invent it. He said Robert volunteered to do it and that he wasn't forced to. Keon Hollis, Robert's fellow bandmate and roommate on the trip, testified about the night of Robert's death. He said he and Robert made a split-second decision to submit to the ritual after the football game had ended, and that a third member, Lisette Sanchez, joined them. He said they did it willingly, and that Robert was eager to do it in order to put it behind him. He said he couldn't see Robert as he was pushing through the gauntlet, but that he could hear people beating him, that he was kicked, shoved, and struck with fists, drumsticks, and mallets. He said that during his own crossing, it seemed like forever, saying that he was dizzy and nauseous. He said he vomited a few times afterwards. Lisette Sanchez told the jury that she participated in the crossing so that she could earn privileges on the band's bus. She said Dante told her that she didn't have to participate and that he asked her 4 times if she was sure that she wanted to do it, but that she wanted to earn credentials and boost her status. She said she had to follow certain Bus C rules because she had not yet crossed the bus. The rules included making her walk backwards onto the bus and to her seat, and not letting her listen to music or sleep during long bus trips. She said by not doing it, she felt like she was breaking a tradition and basically felt left out. She said that whenever she would ask a question, other band members wouldn't respond to her because she hadn't gone through the ritual. She said, "It was kind of like your best friend not talking to you." Jeff Ashton asked her, in the fall of 2011, who was the bus president, and she answered that Dante was. "And how many times do you think you were hit?" he asked. "I don't know, maybe 100 times, she replied. She said Dante had told the other members not to hit her in the kidneys because they were weak. She said she wore a tank top, sports bra, and shorts when she had started the crossing, but that she was stripped by the end of it. She said, "It hurt a lot, like the first minute, and after that, I didn't feel anymore. I guess your body goes into shock after so much beating." The student leader of the band, Jonathan Boyce, took the stand too. He had already pleaded guilty to felony hazing. He said he initially didn't tell police about the beating because he knew that it was wrong. He said he was afraid that police would arrest him and his friends, saying that he knew that it was a crime. The prosecution concluded their case by calling Dr. Sarah Ergang to the stand. She was the assistant medical examiner who performed the autopsy on Robert. She said that Robert died of hemorrhagic shock, saying that he had a massive hemorrhage in his soft tissue and that he lost over half of his blood supply. The defense didn't call any witnesses to the stand or present any evidence in the case. In his closing arguments, Jeff Ashton reiterated that tradition wasn't to blame for Robert's death. He said, "You don't get to break the law because those who came before you did it. That may work when you're 10, but it doesn't work when you're an adult who has the ability to say, no, I won't be part of this ritual anymore." Ashton told the jury that Robert had always been against hazing and that he was nicknamed the Example, a name he earned for his hard work, athleticism, musical talent, and leadership. He held up an autopsy photo of Robert and said that the last decision he made in life is also an example of peer pressure. He said, "It's an example that even the best are subject to the desire to be accepted by their peers. It's an example of what happens when decades of indifference and decades of fantasy lead us to ignore the law." Defense attorney Richard Escobar said in his closing arguments that Robert had voluntarily participated and that the ritual had been in place for generations. Brutal as it was, senseless as it was a competition, he said. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before finding Dante guilty of manslaughter, as well as guilty on the misdemeanor counts. At his sentencing, Dante finally spoke and addressed the Champion family directly.
"Mr. and Mrs. Champion, family and friends, I was told I could be given the opportunity to speak to you, and my mind boggled all last night. What can I say? What should I say? I could literally come up with nothing. So I'm literally just have to speak to you from my heart. I really don't know how I could actually even say sorry to you. I know how everything has affected me emotionally and psychologically. Therefore, I can never understand the burden of you losing your son. If there was a way, I wish the pain that you feel, that I could take that away from you and carry that pain for you. There's nothing I could do to bring your son back. I know. Every morning when I wake up, every night before I go to sleep, I pray for you and your family. Because I don't know how you feel. I can't imagine. This is something that I will live with the rest of my life. Robert Champion, November 19th, 2011, will always be in my life. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about your son or your family. From the bottom of my heart, it's not a day. When I say my prayers for my family, I say prayers for you as well.
Dante told them that he would speak out about hazing, saying that people don't even think about the consequences. Robert's parents also spoke in court. His father said that his son hated violence. My son was against hazing, he said. Not one time in court have you heard that my son put his hand on anybody. Although he said he felt sorry for Dante's family, he said that we have to set an example and that this has got to stop now. Robert's mom also addressed Dante, saying, "You have no idea what my days and nights are like, what they have become." Judge Renee Roche said that Dante was a remarkable young man with limitless potential and a strong support system. But on the other hand, she said, the circumstances of this death were so profoundly disturbing. She said that forgiveness doesn't have a role in the legal system, and she sentenced him to 6 years in prison. The 3 remaining defendants in the case were found guilty in April 2015, but they were sentenced to 10 years of supervised probation. Robert's mother told reporters after his death that Robert had always dreamed of being in the Marching 100 band. She said, his first sight of the Florida A&M University band was at the age of 5, and ever since then he set his goal. He would march around the driveway with a broom handle. About 2 years after Robert Champion's death, on December 7th, 2013, 19-year-old college freshman Chun Deng, or Mike as he was called, was being blindfolded by members of the Pi Delta Psi fraternity. The fraternity had rented a house in the Pocono Mountains in Monroe County, Pennsylvania, as part of their hazing ritual for their prospective new members, or pledges, and Mike was one of those pledges. The Pi Delta Psi fraternity is an Asian American cultural fraternity founded in February 1994. According to their website, the mission of Pi Delta Psi is to spread Asian American cultural awareness in an effort to empower the entire Asian American community. They say they're guided by the pillars of academic achievement, cultural awareness, righteousness, and friendship/loyalty. Mike was the only child of parents who emigrated to the United States from China. In high school, he played handball, a game similar to squash, and won both local and national competitions. He was also very bright. He earned an AP Scholar Award from the College Board and was in the National Society of High School Scholars. In the fall of 2013, Mike enrolled as a freshman at Baruch College, a top-ranked public college in New York City. And now, he was looking to become a member of the Pi Delta Psi fraternity. Once Mike and the other 3 pledges were blindfolded, backpacks with 20 pounds of sand in them were then strapped onto their backs. They were then taken outside to the backyard. They were each assigned a pledge brother, and each pledge was told that, while blindfolded with the 20-pound backpacks on their backs, they had to make it to the other side of the yard, to their pledge brother. The catch was, They were going to be tackled and struck by the other fraternity members along the way. As Mike started to make his way across the yard, he was tackled multiple times with such force that it dazed him. He tried fighting back and kicking his feet at his attackers, but that only seemed to make them more angry. He tried telling them that his head was hurting, but no one seemed to be listening. One of his attackers ran back about 15 feet before charging at him full force while Mike stood there, blindfolded. But this time, when he fell to the ground, he didn't get back up. A few of the fraternity brothers carried Mike inside and put him down on a couch by the fireplace. They were panicked. He wasn't waking up. They tried giving him water and putting sugar on his lips. He was breathing, but he was making funny breathing noises that sounded like snoring. In a panic, one of the brothers called the fraternity's president, Andy Mang, and told him what happened. They then changed his clothing and removed anything else that could identify him as being associated with the fraternity. Their cover-up had only just begun. 2 hours later, 3 of Mike's fraternity brothers showed up at the Geisinger, Wyoming Valley Hospital, approximately 30 miles away from the rental house. Charles Lai, Mike's pledge brother, Sheldon Wong, and Danny Chen carried Mike inside. He was unconscious and barely breathing. When asked what had happened to him, they told the ER doctors that he had hit his head while wrestling. Mike was admitted into the intensive care unit at 6:42 a.m. Meanwhile, Charles Lai called the fraternity members back at the rental house and told them to remove all fraternity memorabilia from the home, that the police would likely be coming by. About 2 hours later, the police were called to the hospital. When Detective Robert Miller arrived, doctors told him that Mike had been brought in critical condition with a head injury. They told him that he was brain dead, on life support, and that he would likely not survive. Detective Miller then interviewed the 3 friends. Charles Lai told Miller that he didn't see what happened, but he admitted that it had been during a Pi Delta Psi event, where the pledges had been involved in a ritual called the glass ceiling. He said the object of the ritual was for the pledge to get through the line of brothers while they were pushed and shoved down. And although he said he didn't see what happened, he did admit to telling another fraternity member to clean up the fraternity memorabilia and to hide it so the police wouldn't see it. He said the fraternity's president, Andy Mang, had encouraged them to do that. Sheldon Wong told Miller that he was afraid to speak outside of the fraternity, but he said that Mike was in the backyard when he was pushed and fell backward while wearing a book bag and with his arms crossed in front of him. He told Miller that there was only a water bottle in the backpack and that he didn't see who had pushed him. He said Mike was then taken inside by the fire and his clothes were changed. Danny Chen told Miller that the trip was actually a getaway trip before they start finals. He said Mike was a new pledge and that there were several guys outside wrestling at about 5 a.m. He said they were going to cross the new pledges, but that he didn't see him fall. He said they tried giving Mike water, sugar, and chocolate in an effort to wake him up. Charles, Sheldon, and Danny were interviewed again at the police station, where they gave a little more information about what had happened. Charles again said that he didn't see what happened, but did admit to helping carry Mike inside and putting him by the fireplace. He said Mike's body was straight like a board. He said it was about 25 minutes before they decided to take him to the hospital. He described Mike as having phlegm in his throat and said that he was having a hard time breathing. He told Miller that it's protocol to put away fraternity memorabilia. He admitted that he had first lied about what had happened, saying that Mike hadn't really been wrestling. In Sheldon's second interview, he said that he was the pledge educator, or PE, and that he was in charge of the new pledges and teaching them. He said the incident happened between 5 and 6 a.m. in the backyard, and that he saw what happened, but that he didn't see who did it. He saw Mike fall several times, at least 3 or more. He said that he would typically say stop if anything got out of hand, but that he guessed that 1 split second things got out of hand, and I couldn't do anything about it. He said after Mike fell, he was snoring, and so they brought him inside and wrapped him in a blanket by the fireplace. He said he was tensed up while on the couch, and that he was dead weight when they carried him to the car. He told Miller that he was making groggy noises on the way to the hospital. In Danny's second interview, he told Miller that Mike was groaning, shivering, and being tense while in the car. When asked about putting the fraternity memorabilia away, he said, "But that's our protocol, and that they don't like to get their fraternity involved in certain problems because it creates problems for the fraternity." Danny also admitted that the pledges had been wearing book bags that represented the fraternity's weight, a sandbag that was approximately 20 pounds. While Detective Miller was interviewing Charles, Sheldon, and Danny, Detective Corporal Bray went to the rental house with some other patrol officers. They learned that some of the fraternity brothers had already fled the scene prior to their arrival, but they interviewed the members who were still there, and they all had different versions of the story to tell. A few members told Detective Bray that they hadn't seen what happened. They were either inside or were sleeping at the time, while others at first lied about not seeing it, but then later admitted that they had. A few said that they had been outside when it happened, but they seemed to downplay it, saying that the pledges' backpacks only had water bottles in them. But some of them gave up a little bit more information. One said that he got pissed off at what happened, saying that they had taken it too far. Another admitted hearing Mike say that his head hurt, and said that after Mike was pushed down the first time, he was out of breath. This same member then called Mike unlucky that he had suffered a brain injury. A few members told Detective Bray that they did see what happened, and that Mike had gotten hit harder than any of the other pledges because he was fighting back and had kicked Raymond Lamb, which then made the bros mad. They identified the 3 last guys that hit him as Raymond Lamb, his pledge brother Charles Lai, and Kenny Kwan. One member confirmed that Kenny had taken a 15 to 16-foot running start to spear Mike, and that was the last spear. Kenny himself talked to Detective Bray, at first claiming that he didn't participate and that he didn't even know that Mike was hurt until he woke up in the morning. But later, he said he actually oversaw the ritual and admitted to pushing Mike, but refusing to call it a tackle. But later, he agreed that it was, in fact, a tackle. Kenny said no one called for an ambulance after Mike got hurt because one of the brothers had looked it up and the cost was too high. Detective Bray learned that there were 4 pledges, 2 of whom were the favorites and 2 who had bad attitudes, which included Mike. Some members admitted to trying to cover up what happened, saying that the officers' arrival had interrupted a meeting they were having, where they were trying to decide what they would say. Others said they even took part in cleaning up the house, taking all the fraternity memorabilia and packing it up into their cars prior to the police arriving. One member said that they didn't want the fraternity to get into trouble and that he was worried about lawsuits and liability. The next day, on December 9th, 2013, at 10:51 a.m., Mike Deng was pronounced dead. The cause of death was closed head trauma due to blunt force head trauma. The manner of death was homicide. 4 days later, the Pocono Mountain Regional Police Chief Harry Lewis publicly appealed to the fraternity members who had left the house prior to the police officer's arrival to come forward. Anthony Foon, Stephen Chen, and Stephen Lowe were 3 of those members who eventually did come forward and speak to police. And just like the other fraternity members, their stories varied. One said that Mike's backpack was empty and that he hadn't been hit that many times. But later in the interview, he said that he was tackled about 2 or 3 more times than what he had originally stated. Another one claimed that the pledges weren't wearing backpacks at all, but then later admitted that they were, saying that they only had a water bottle in them. Although police would later find out that a fraternity member had called Andy Mang, the fraternity president, after the incident occurred, Andy released a statement on behalf of the Pi Delta Psi fraternity, saying, "Our early understanding is that this incident occurred at an unsanctioned event that was strictly prohibited by our organization. As a result of this incident, we are immediately suspending all new member education nationwide until further notice." But Baruch College would take it one step further, permanently banning the fraternity from its campus. The investigation into Mike's death continued, and even with the fraternity members' conflicting statements, a clear picture of what had happened was beginning to emerge. Detective Miller obtained a search warrant for the rental house. They collected various fraternity memorabilia, including clothing, pedals, banners and signs, notebooks, and book bags with sandbags inside. They also confiscated electronics, cell phones, a camera, and some illegal drugs, including marijuana and mushrooms. A search of the cell phones revealed text messages between the fraternity members, talking about getting their stories straight, hiding the fraternity memorabilia, and even discussing how Mike's ritual had been too hard. There were also internet searches found that included searches for concussion adults, concussion can't wake up, unconscious, snoring but not waking up, and pupils don't dilate. And one fraternity member texted one of their friends to ask about that friend's grandfather's recent fall and death. The Monroe County District Attorney's Office hired a forensic pathologist named Dr. Wayne Ross to perform an injury causation analysis. Dr. Ross made the following conclusions. The cause of death was multiple traumatic injuries. There were at least 3 clear impacts to the head, but there may have been more. The force of these impacts were significant and severe, and it would take hundreds of pounds of impulsive loads and/or hundreds of G-forces in order to cause the damage to the interior of the brain. The massive bruise to Mike's back was due to repeated blunt force impacts, which resulted in traumatic asphyxia. The bruises to his thighs were compatible with blunt force impact and/or restraint. And the delay in treatment of 1 to 2 hours significantly contributed to his death. The delay led to continued physiological stressors that resulted in primary neurogenic shock as well as secondary shock. Finally, in July 2015, indictments were handed down from the grand jury. The most serious of the indictments were for Charles Lai, Kenny Kwan, Raymond Lamb, Daniel Lee, and Sheldon Wong, and the charges were third-degree murder, involuntary manslaughter, aggravated assault, simple assault, hindering apprehension, hazing, and criminal conspiracy to commit the same. 3 other members were charged with aggravated assault, simple assault, hindering apprehension, hazing, and criminal conspiracy to commit the same. 2 members were charged with simple assault, hindering apprehension, hazing, criminal conspiracy to commit the same, and 27 additional members were charged with the cover-up, hindering apprehension, hazing, and criminal conspiracy to commit the same. The Pi Delta Psi fraternity itself was also indicted on the more serious charges, including third-degree murder. In October 2015, Charles Lai, Kenny Kwan, Raymond Lamb, Daniel Lee, and Sheldon Wong, the defendants facing the most serious charges, were arraigned on the third-degree murder counts. Bail was set at $500,000 for all of them, except Daniel Lee, whose bail was set at $150,000. Prosecutors said that Daniel Lee was the fraternity chapter president and that although he didn't participate, he was there and didn't do anything to stop it. And a month later, Daniel would shock everyone when he decided to cooperate in the investigation and testify against his fellow fraternity brothers in exchange for lesser charges. At a preliminary hearing, Daniel took the stand and said that after Mike's death, the fraternity brothers had gathered in the basement of the rental home and tried to come up with a story that they would tell about what had happened. He said 2 weeks later, they again got together to talk about the cover-up. He said that Charles Lai had asked everyone what they had been telling people so that he could tell his attorney. Daniel also said on the stand that it was written in the Pi Delta Psi handbook to immediately email the national chapter about any serious injuries so that they would have time to prepare for any cases against them. He said they immediately called the national fraternity president, Andy Mang. Daniel also recounted the incident and confirmed that Kenny Kwan had gotten a 10 to 15-foot running start and then tackled Mike. Afterwards, he said Mike never got up. Instead, he lay there lifeless. After the hearing, the judge ruled that the case could proceed to trial. In January 2017, one of the members who had been indicted on the lesser charges pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 5 years probation, a $1,000 fine, and 100 days of community service. During his hearing, he said that he was extremely sorry for what had happened, calling it unfortunate. And then, just this past May, Sheldon Wong, Charles Lai, Kenny Kwan, and Raymond Lamb pleaded guilty to charges of being accomplices to voluntary manslaughter and hindering apprehension. Their third-degree murder and manslaughter charges had been dropped. The prosecutor in the case, Kimberly Metzger, said they were dropped because there was no legal malice involved in what led to Mike's death. They will be formally sentenced in December 2017. Sentencing guidelines say their sentences should be 22 to 36 months. However, they could be sentenced up to 27 years in prison. As for the other fraternity members, they're expected to go on trial in November 2017. This next case I'm going to tell you about is one that has been in the national news over the last couple months, and especially over the last few weeks. On February 2nd, 2017, 14 pledges gathered in the basement of the Beta Theta Pi fraternity house on the Penn State University campus. This night would be one of the final hurdles they would have to go through before becoming full-fledged members of Beta Theta Pi. The pledges were instructed to stand in a straight line and were given a bottle of vodka. They were told they needed to pass the bottle down the line and keep drinking it until it was gone. They were then ordered to visit different drinking stations throughout the home, where they would have to drink more vodka, chug beer, and drink wine as fast as they could. They were then instructed to play multiple rounds of beer pong, where they were forced to down 4 to 5 drinks within minutes. The fraternity then hosted a social gathering with a sorority on campus, and again, the pledges were instructed to continue drinking. The fraternity house had video cameras inside that would tragically document the final hours of one college student's life. By 10:30 p.m., video surveillance showed that the pledges were highly intoxicated. In particular, 19-year-old Timothy Piazza can be seen staggering around, unable to walk without assistance. At 10:45 p.m., Tim goes to the front door and unsuccessfully tries to open it. He turns around and staggers over to the basement steps, where he falls, landing face down at the bottom of the stairs. At 10:47 p.m., Tim is carried back upstairs by 4 fraternity brothers. He's unconscious and appears limp. They put him on the couch, and 2 minutes later, they try dumping liquid on his face, but he doesn't respond. They try slapping him, but still nothing. Another fraternity brother, Cordell Davis, comes in, and he tells them that Tim doesn't look good, and so he starts yelling that they need to call 911. One of the 4 brothers with Tim stands up and shoves Cordell, telling him to leave, that they have it under control. Cordell then goes and finds Ed Gilmartin, the fraternity vice president, and tells them that they need to call 911, that Tim doesn't look good, and that he might have a concussion. But Ed tells Cordell that he's crazy, to leave it alone. But at 11:53 p.m., a group text message is sent out from one of the fraternity brothers. It reads, "Also, Tim Piazza might actually be a problem. He fell 15 feet down a flight of stairs, hair first. Going to need help." At about 1 a.m., Tim can be seen on video, still on the couch, twitching and vomiting. The fraternity brothers turn him over and pin him down with a heavy backpack to prevent him from turning over and potentially choking on his own vomit. Hours go by as Tim lays there, unconscious. At one point, 2 fraternity members start drunkenly wrestling and even land on Tim. Tim falls off the couch and the brothers drag him back up, but then they slam him down on the couch, one of them even smacking him hard across the stomach. The brothers eventually leave Tim on the couch and presumably go to sleep themselves. Surveillance video captures Tim managing to get up a few more times, but he's struggling to move and keeps falling down, his head continuing to hit the hardwood floor as he falls, and at one point, even smacking into an iron railing. Just after 5 a.m., Tim can be seen lying on the floor, in the fetal position, hands clutching his abdomen. A fraternity brother walks by and steps twice over him. Another brother enters the room and takes out his phone, reportedly Snapchatting Tim as he lies on the ground. And just over 2 hours later, Tim falls down the basement stairs again. At about 10 a.m., one of the fraternity brothers asks another one if he had heard about the pledge who had fallen down the stairs last night. They notice Tim's shoes are still in the hallway, so they decide to go around looking for him. They find him in the basement, unconscious again, breathing heavy and with blood on his face. He was cold to the touch, pale, and his eyes were half open. They carry him back upstairs and again put him on the couch. For the next 42 minutes, the brothers try shaking him, propping him up, and wiping his face. But Tim doesn't wake up. One of the brothers takes out his phone, and it would later come out that he was searching the internet, using the search queries, falling asleep after head injury. True or false, a person with a serious head injury or concussion should be kept awake. Cold extremities in drunk person. And binge drinking, alcohol, bruising or discoloration, cold feet and cold hands. They discuss whether or not to go upstairs and tell the chapter advisor, but decide against it. They decide to wait until the beta president gets there before determining what to do. While they're waiting, one of the brothers suggested trying to dress Tim, saying that it might look better if he was fully dressed before getting medical treatment. They try dressing him, but Tim's body was too stiff. Brendan Young, the chapter president, arrives and can be seen on video sitting down on the adjacent couch, his head in his hands. At 10:48 a.m., one of the brothers finally calls 911.
What is the address of your emergency?
220 North Fair Street.
You said 229?
220 North Fair Street.
Okay, what's your name?
Ryan McCann.
And what's going on today?
We have a friend who is unconscious. He hasn't moved. He's cold extremity. It's probably need an ambulance.
Okay, how old is he?
He is 19. Yeah, 19 years old.
And was he breathing?
He is breathing.
Was there any alcohol or anything involved, do you know?
Yes, there is.
All right, we'll get somebody over there, okay? If anything changes, just call back and let us know.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
He never tells the dispatcher that Tim fell down the stairs the night before. Tim was transported to the hospital and was immediately routed into surgery, but he was ultimately pronounced dead at 1:23 a.m. on February 4th, 2017, while in the surgical intensive care unit. According to the pathologist, Tim's death was the direct result of traumatic brain injuries. He said that Tim's extremely high level of intoxication led to his physical fall down the steps, which led to the injuries he sustained, which ultimately resulted in his death. In May 2017, 18 people were charged in relation to Tim's death. Fraternity President Brendan Young and Pledge Master Daniel Casey are facing charges of involuntary manslaughter, aggravated assault, simple assault, reckless endangerment, tampering with evidence, hazing, furnishing alcohol to minors, unlawful acts relative to liquor, disorderly conduct, and consumption of alcohol by a minor. Other members are facing lesser charges. The fraternity itself is being charged with 1 count of involuntary manslaughter, 50 counts of hazing, 48 counts of furnishing alcohol to minors, and 48 counts of unlawful acts related to liquor. In addition to the damning and heartbreaking surveillance video taken from the fraternity house, evidence of a cover-up was also presented to the grand jury. The following information is from the grand jury indictment. After Tim's death, the fraternity members and pledges used an app called GroupMe, as well as Facebook Messenger, to talk about what happened. On February 3rd, 2017, at 5:09 p.m., fraternity president Brendan Young sent a text message to Pledge Master Daniel Casey that read, "Make sure the pledges clean the basement and get rid of any evidence of alcohol." Daniel responds, "Okay, they're taking care of the basement." In another text exchange on that day, the Beta Vice President, Ed Gilmartin, also sends a text message to Daniel Casey that says, "Make sure the pledges keep quiet about last night and this situation." Daniel replies, "They know." And Ed says, "Okay, good." On February 5th at 12:02 a.m., Brendan has another text message exchange with Jeff Stillwell, another fraternity brother. Jeff says, "It could have happened to anyone. Between you and me, what are the chances the house gets shut down?" Brendan responds, "I think very high. I just hope none of us get into any lawsuits." A little later in the conversation, Jeff asks, "What do you think they would sue for? That he passed away or the way we handled it?" Brendan says, "Probably both. They could get us for giving him alcohol that contributed to his death. Also, the guys taking care of him didn't call an ambulance right away, so they could get in trouble for negligence. I just don't know what I'm liable for as president." One of the Pledge brothers reportedly sent a text to his fellow pledges where he says, "If need be, just tell them what I told you guys. Found him behind in a way bar the next morning around 10 a.m., and he was freezing cold. But we decided to call 911 instantly because the kid's health was paramount." Other messages between additional fraternity members talk about deleting different text message and Facebook group chats as a precaution. The grand jury concluded that many of the messages demonstrated a concerted effort to destroy or withhold evidence of the alleged hazing, as well as the underage consumption of alcohol. The grand jury also wrote in their indictment that the Penn State Greek community nurtured an environment so permissive of excessive drinking and hazing that it emboldened its members to repeatedly act with reckless disregard to human life. They wrote that Tim's death was not a result of isolated conduct or simple negligence, but that Tim died as a direct result of the extremely reckless conduct of the members of the Beta fraternity, who they said operated within the permissive atmosphere fostered by the Pennsylvania State University Interfraternity Council. It's obvious that the loss of Tim hit his family hard. Tim's parents and brother told CNN that when they got to the hospital, he was alive, but he wasn't able to communicate. They held his hand and told him that they loved him. None of the fraternity brothers, nor any officials from Penn State University, attended Tim's funeral. I talked to Doug Fierberg, who, 25 years ago, established the legal practice of representing victims of school violence nationwide. Doug's practice specializes in representing people who have been hurt or killed in school settings, and in fact, he represents the family of Michael Deng, the second case I covered in this episode.
Around 25 or so years ago, I picked up two cases at the same time. One was a high school young woman who was set up to be gang raped and she attended a Tony private school in Washington, D.C., and at the same time I had that case, I picked up my first hazing case at the University of Maryland. What I realized in both of those circumstances was that young people who were encountering the legal system for the first time were extremely vulnerable and needed counsel that communicated well with them and protected their interests. And I, having had a background in working with young people, realized that I was well equipped to do just that. At the same time, I also learned how serious the issues of school violence were, and that there were no lawyers. And when I say no, there were no lawyers in this country that specialized in representing victims of school violence.
And how big of a problem would you say that hazing is in our country, and particularly on school campuses?
The best indicator, perhaps, of whether or not it's a big problem is the research that the fraternity industries had done, and it's in one of their risk management policies that demonstrate that in the 1980s, the Greek industry was the sixth worst insurance risk in the country. And the seventh was, I believe it was asbestos haulers. So you have to have a tremendous number of incidents of injury and death in order to get to that level. And it's systemic because they share a management structure and a risk management set of principles that are doomed to fail and have failed time and again. So one of the central models of the Greek industry is that they will self-manage at college campuses. They will self-manage student housing. They will self-manage the provision of alcohol. They will self-manage all of the policies designed to protect others, and that structure has been demonstrated as being negligent. They cannot self-manage those issues effectively, have not done so for many years, and the result is injury and death.
And legally speaking, what do you think, and I know that they vary state by state, but what do you think about the hazing laws that are in place currently?
I think many of them are outdated because some of the best ones, and there I would cite, say, for example, California, identify that hazing, when it becomes extreme and results in serious injury or death, can actually be treated as a felony. And in many circumstances, when the hazing statutes were developed, they were identified as, lower class misdemeanors with small fines. And in many circumstances, that ignores what is in fact part of the problem with hazing, is that it can become deadly. So it's good that the statutes exist, but many haven't been reviewed or modified in years.
The three cases I've outlined in this episode aren't the first tragic stories of hazing, and unfortunately, they likely won't be the last. I chose these cases for this episode, but unfortunately, there were a lot more to choose from. I asked Doug which case has shocked him the most, and perhaps not surprisingly, there were too many to count.
We could start off with the death of Gordy Bailey at University of Colorado, where they were hazing him in an alcohol-fueled event, and he lost consciousness and was laying on the floor in the library of the fraternity for hours and hours and hours. And during the time period when he needed help and deserved help and could have been saved, the fraternity members were marking up his body with pens and with all sorts of outrageous sayings. And rather than take him to the hospital, it was treated as a big old joke. And he passed away to the death of George Dadoon, where, again, plied with dangerous amounts of alcohol and dragged into a fraternity house and left on a couch with no one bothering to pay attention to him until he died. Carson Starkey, plied with alcohol in a hazing ritual and actually put into a car and got ready to take him to the hospital. And the individuals turned back and decided not to take him to a hospital and put him on a bed in the garage where he died. The list is long. It goes all the way to the Michael Deng circumstance, where the glass ceiling ritual, where they would tackle individuals who were blindfolded, and then as Michael suffered a severe head injury, the individuals would research the signs of concussions and all those sorts of things without being reasonable and taking Michael to the hospital where he could have survived. To the suicide death of Marquise Bram, who experienced being locked in a closet for hours and hours and hours with a collective trash can for vomit, being forced to do drugs, being forced to steal things, lots of terrible, terrible things that distressed Marquise over a period of several months, leading to his suicide. So the list is long, and the behaviors and the failures to act have been outrageous. And these circumstances are unique to fraternities because you don't see this type of misconduct and trail of injury and death in any other industry within schools.
I spoke with one other person for this episode, Emily Pualwan from hazingprevention.org, an organization that was founded 10 years ago with the mission of empowering people to prevent hazing before it even begins. And as I noted before, hazing isn't just in colleges, and it isn't just in fraternities or sororities either. Emily gave me some surprising statistics about how broad hazing really is.
Many people will, in the past, have heard of hazing as it was related to Greek life. So fraternities and sororities, for example, there has been a number of incidences in the news. The statistics show that hazing happens even more frequently within sports. Greek life is probably right behind sports, but the interesting statistics are that hazing happens in almost every situation where there is a group that has formed and there's a power dynamic between those who are in a group and those who want to join a group. So, for example, there was a study done in 2008 and it asked students for each activity, were there any hazing behaviors? And I will caution to say that students do not usually self-identify as activities as hazing. So the questions in these studies sometimes ask, were you ever subjected to forced eating consumption? Or were you humiliated or required to do some sort of task that's subservient? So we don't usually say, were you hazed? Because I think 90-something% of students will say, oh, no. But when we ask them some of the specific activities that are considered hazing, they will admit to that. So, for example, 79% of varsity athletic team members have reported in college that they were subject to hazing. About 75% social fraternity or sororities, and then a lot of different groups. For example, 24% of church groups have reported that they are, or students that were in church groups have reported that they were hazed, 20% in honor society. So it is fairly broad across the board. Another interesting statistic is that males and females will report hazing pretty equally. So that's sort of an interesting statistic. 48% of high school students come to college with a previous hazing experience, and even higher if they're an athlete. So hazing is also not just limited to college. We see it starting in middle school, and very prevalent in high schools as well.
So why do you think that hazing is something that is tolerated and even attractive to people who are looking to join one of these groups?
I think the main reason, and I mentioned it a little before, is if you think of the power dynamic of a group that exists and another group that wants to join, and you think of it from a human behavior standpoint, the desire to join a group is very strong. And many times there have been things that maybe are misconstrued as tradition or, we've always done it this way, my parents did this, etc., that you have to work to earn your right to join that group. And that as a philosophy is not necessarily a bad thing. For example, in sports, you have to, go through combine and get certain numbers or percentages, within your sports, run this fast, et cetera. And those things, of course, are perfectly appropriate. It's when the activities sort of cross the line, and many times unsupervised, young men and women will come up with activities that they think are either fun or demanding to have people join, like drinking alcohol or forced consumption of food, or, going down those paths that are unhealthy behaviors, to try to establish a power dynamic of you can't be one of us until you do this. We often get questions from people about what's the difference between hazing and bullying, right? And there are some overlaps, but bullying is a power dynamic as well, to exclude somebody from a group. And hazing is actually a power dynamic to include people into your group if they pass these quote unquote tests.
So what can we, as a society, as parents, as caring people, do about hazing? Well, the first step is awareness. Making sure that everyone from the organization itself to the higher-ups to the students themselves are aware that this sort of behavior can have fatal consequences at the worst, and legal or even psychological consequences at best. Emily agrees.
So from an advocacy standpoint, I'll put my advocacy hat on now. I would say awareness is the huge first step, which is hazing is not fun and games. It's not boys will be boys. It's dangerous and deadly. And that hazing is both physical and psychological. So, and both of those things can have long-term negative impact on young men and women. Statistics show that people will drop out of school or drop out of clubs. Their grades go down, that kind of thing. So, of course, much of the news media will focus on horrific deaths that take place, and those are horrible. And clearly, we need to work to prevent those. But there's also a lot of psychological hazing, hazing that's never reported, et cetera, that needs to be brought to light. So the fact that more news stories are being written on these, the fact that high school hazing is now all over the news, is not necessarily because it's happening more, but it's because people are aware what it is. They are aware that it's dangerous or deadly. Parents are now coming forward, and students more so, to say, hey, I think this is hazing and I think this is wrong. And it's getting a lot more attention, both from a litigation standpoint as well as from a sort of school administration and national organization standpoint.
I talked to Emily about the hazing laws in America, too.
In the U.S., currently 44 states have some sort of hazing law in the books. So there's still a handful that do not have anything. And then among those 44, it ranges drastically from misdemeanor to felony. Many states will, the original language was written years ago, and they only use the term college students. In a few cases, they only use the term fraternities or sororities. And so there's a huge discrepancy from state to state of what the laws are. They're catching up, and a number of states who have had laws on the books are now going back and drafting more sort of stricter or more detailed hazing bills that will cover the broad range of activities, the broad range of students or even adults, and are putting in place more specifics, so that if an incident occurs, there is some sort of state law or statute on the books that will cover it. And so at hazingprevention.org, under our resources, there is a link called State Laws, and you can actually click on the state, and it will pull up both the statute of what's the current law on the books, as well as a link to that state website for more information. So I always encourage folks, know what your school policies are, know what your national organization's policies are, or your club's policies, learn your state laws, and you can go on our website and click on that interactive map, and it will provide that for you.
What would you say to parents who are getting ready to send their child off to college or even in high school? Like, how would you recommend parents educate their children about this?
Yes. So also if you go to our website, we have a top nav bar. There's a section called FAQs. And if you go there, you can see what is hazing, what are the state laws, what are its consequences. And there is a link that's what parents need. And those two links have a lot of details for parents and students about, you're going to join an organization. These are some of the things to look for. These are some of the warning signs. We try to provide resources for parents to say, look for these types of clues or symptoms that might indicate that an hazing activity is taking place. We try to provide resources for students that say, if you're in the moment, these are steps that you can take to get out and be safe. These are steps that you can look for to help if you're a bystander and you see a friend who is in this situation. So a lot of those resources are available on our website.
Whenever I cover cases that involve fatalities, I always hope that by sharing the victim's story, someone else's life can benefit from it. And the stories I covered today are no different. I hope that hearing the stories of Robert Champion, Michael Deng, and Tim Piazza can help prevent another family from having to go through what theirs have. Visit hazingprevention.org for more information on what you can do to help. And that's all for this episode. A special thank you to Doug Fierberg and Emily Pualwan for lending their insight on the topic of hazing for this episode. You can visit Doug's website at tfnlgroup.com or schoolviolencelaw.com. As a reminder, please consider joining my Facebook discussion group by going to courtjunkie.com/Facebook. You can also find me on Twitter at courtjunkiepod, on Instagram at courtjunkie, or you can email me at podcast@courtjunkie.com. And one last thing. If you hate hearing the ads on these episodes, you can get access to early, ad-free episodes by donating as little as $1 a month on Patreon. That's patreon.com/courtjunkie. Thank you all for listening. Until next time.